Very good evening. Thanks for joining us here on the Sunday edition of the Urban Debate. I am Afrida Rehman Ali. The Ministry of Women and Child Welfare has released the figures for the number of orphan children in India last Tuesday. And the ministry says that 577 children across the country have been orphaned in the past 55 days by the second wave. The number still seems small given the number of fatalities we have seen of young patients and young parents. Some of the states are yet to report their figures. The Supreme Court has also intervened on Friday now, seeking nationwide information on children orphaned or missing since the pandemic that began last year in March, and it has directed all states to provide basic amenities of ration, food and shelter to the vulnerable children and those who have been orphaned. In fact, amicus curiae and the Supreme Court lawyer Gaurav Agarwal, who was assisting in this matter, has said that children may have lost guardians, having lost parents or sole earning member in the family, making them vulnerable. Such children in many cases have gone missing. And there is, of course, the fear of child trafficking and child labor. These are issues that have now come up in court. The deadline given by court to respond on this is Sunday evening, that's this evening, where the court has said we are of the opinion that the centre and the states should share the latest information on children who have become orphans, whether because of the pandemic or otherwise, and take steps to attend to their basic needs. All such information to be shared in the government portal by this evening. So that's the issue we are looking at, viewers. Remember, the centre has only woken up to this issue after there were social media messages circulating on adopting children. And that raised the alarm on orphan children falling into the wrong hands. Now, of course, the centre has announced a financial package to cover the education and health insurance through the PM CARES Fund. It has promised free education and health coverage, health insurance coverage and higher education loan along with monetary aid till they turn 18. And many states have also followed suit. But the important thing to remember, of course, here is that we are still looking at the issue of whether the orphan children are physically safe and whether their mental well-being is looked after or not. What is the system in place to make sure that they do not fall into the wrong hands? So I'm going to introduce my guests this evening. Joining me today, Mr. Tuhin A, spokesperson of the BJP, Dr. Sameer Dalwai, spokesperson of NCP and developmental pediatrician. Also will be joining us shortly Mr. Girish Kulkarni, founder and director of Snehalaya. Welcome, gentlemen. Thanks for joining us here on the Urban Debate. Good to have you with us. I want to begin by asking Dr. Dalwai that, you know, what we are looking at right now, Dr. Sameer Dalwai, is that whether we have a system in place to handle this. This is a highly sensitive issue. We are not talking about it enough. Of course, a financial package has been announced after much ado, but is it enough? Is the responsibility of the centre end with extending financial assistance, or do we need to do more for these children who have been orphaned by the pandemic?
Good evening, Ms. Afrida. Let me start as a pediatrician first. And we understand that this is not an ordinary situation. That's the answer to your question. Because it's always very difficult. It's a very sensitive issue dealing with loss and bereavement counseling in children. However, it is much worse than this time because this is coming in now on the unfortunate ones, those who are in this situation, on the background of a year of the pandemic and of lockdowns and missing school and so on and so forth. So it's on the background of an already psychosocial trauma that these children have experienced. And on top of that, to lose somebody near and dear, somebody who may be the sole person taking care of you, as well as the sole bread earner, can be devastating for these children. It is also worsened by the fact that in normal times, somebody would take in the child, even a neighbor would. You would not even wait for extended family to arrive from another city. Here, it's worsened by the fact that if the child is suspected to have COVID as well, neighbors would be wary of taking them into their own house because of the situation right now. And hence, there have been cases where children have been left alone in the house, in the home, without any food, any care, any protection. If one or both the parents are in the hospital, or one may have passed away and the other is in the hospital because of the illness. So it's an unprecedented situation in our lifetime. And the grief and the problem of bereavement is multiplied much, much more. So it's both a physical as well as an emotional problem. Emotional, of course, we've spoken about very briefly, but even physical. because there's a basic issue of taking care of the child physically in terms of food and shelter. And also, let me end by saying that there's a huge danger of
Now, there is a
trafficking,
process in
child
place.
abuse.
Okay, sure.
There's a danger
Yes,
about
we'll come to
trafficking,
that,
about
Dr.
physical
Dalwai. We'll
abuse.
come to that. I just want to point out, yes, we are going to look at the process and procedure that is in place now. Like, what should you do if you know of somebody, a child that has been orphaned during the pandemic? Now, a lot of people are unaware that you cannot simply pitch in to adopt a child or take a child under your care, because you have to report the child. The first thing that you need to do is to notify the authorities about it. That information will also be flashing on our screens, because we want to break down the information for our viewers. This is extremely important. These are children we are talking about. Tuhin Sinha, the number that the ministry has shared, 577, seems way too small right now. Of course, we are not going to dispute it. These are the official figures. But given the number of fatalities that we have seen of young parents, it is highly possible, like many other statistics and records, government records, that this number is also less than the actual figure. So therefore, the problem might be much bigger than what we are looking at right now. Children have always been low on priority, isn't it? Now also, like I mentioned, this issue has come up after there are social media posts of people who do not know the process and procedure, talking about adopting children, offering to adopt children, which is against the law. There are very stringent measures on how to adopt a child. The state-run homes are also not a great place, Mr. Sinha. We know what has happened in Bihar and UP. Under the circumstances, don't you think we are ill-equipped to handle this situation? Do we have systems in place?
Well, Afrida, I think you're just jumping the gun. This is a historic step in safeguarding the future of 577 children as of now. And I'm sure the numbers will get added. We don't have much control over the numbers because, Rahul Gandhi does not understand this, but you need to understand that the numbers are collated from the numbers provided by different state governments. So I'm not saying that the numbers would be fudged. But if they are more alert in reporting the numbers, the center would merely collate those numbers.
No, we are not saying that. In fact, I also said that some of the states are yet to report their figures. So it's clearly not the final figure.
Yes.
Sorry, yes, go ahead.
Look at how visionary this announcement is. Number one, it provides, I'm assuming that many of the orphan children would have relatives. It is a little too presumptuous to assume that they would not have relatives as well. Relatives as in first relatives. So to provide them free education up till the age of 18, then from 18 to 23, the interest which is earned on the fixed deposit on the corpus of 10 lakhs created, they earn a regular interest up to the, stipend up to the age of 23. And from 23, at 23, they earn that lump sum. Now, throughout the time till the 23 years of age, they are completely shielded insofar as health is concerned by the Pradhan Mantri, the health schemes which are available to protect them. Insofar as the education is concerned, it is entirely free. So I think it's the most all-pervasive, the most comprehensive step that one could think of. Yes, the details could still be worked out because I'm sure there is mental trauma which many of them would be going through. But as a first step, it is absolutely remarkable. I wish previous governments had, thought of similar measures, at least in 1984, when 4,000 people, died in the Bhopal gas tragedy. I wish something of that had been conceived then, or when, at least 1,000 people had died.
No, let's not, even before this scheme has kicked off and it has started covering children, you are, highlighting how great a scheme it is. I do understand that this is a financial package announced from the PM CARES Fund. So obviously it is going to go a long way in financial assistance. But as we all know, and as a mother of 2 children, I know it's much more than just the financial assistance that works when it comes to children, especially at the tender age. They need much more than that. Of course, education is taken care of, health insurance is taken care of. But I was asking you a question of beyond that, when we talk about providing them a home in the absence of their parent. In fact, I'll have Dr. Dalwai come in on that. I want to quickly first bring in Girish Kulkarni, who's also with us now. Good evening, Mr. Kulkarni. I want to ask you about the process and procedure. This is extremely critical to understand. Yes, we are already aware, of course, that the first option is apparently a close relative to provide a home to an orphan child. The second option goes to the child care home if there is nobody to immediately come forward. And then, of course, there are adoption processes. But is the system really foolproof? Do we have a system where a child's safety, physical safety first, is completely taken care of through this process, Mr. Kulkarni?
बच्चों के लिए फिलहाल तो जो सिस्टम है वो उतना कारीगर ढंग से काम कर रहा है ऐसा तो कोई बोल नहीं सकता। और आपने जो परिणाम का जिक्र यहाँ पे किया है, मुझे लगता है कि इसमें फैमिली बेस्ड केयर के लिए पिछले 3 सालों से बहुत सारी संस्थाएं प्रयास कर रही है, क्योंकि इंस्टीट्यूशन बहुत अच्छी जगह नहीं है कोई भी ऑर्फन बच्चे के लिए। उसको एक परिवार के साथ जोड़ना चाहिए, आइदर उसके परिवार के साथ या उसके करीबी रिश्तेदारों के साथ, या फिर कोई ऐसा परिवार जो उसकी जिम्मेदारी लेना चाहता है उसके साथ उसको जोड़ना चाहिए। तो अभी ये सब जो पीएम केयर से अभी जो हो रहा है उसका तो बहुत स्वागत है, क्योंकि बड़े पैमाने पे बच्चों के लिए कुछ फाइनेंशियल एड और एजुकेशनल एड और सपोर्ट दिया जा रहा है। लेकिन फैमिली बेस्ड केयर जैसी चीजों की तरफ इस वक्त बहुत ही मतलब दुर्लक्ष्य किया गया है इस पूरी स्कीम में। उसको बढ़ावा मिलने के अभी एक उचित अवसर अभी इस वक्त आया हुआ है। दूसरा तो ये कि अभी हम अभी देखेंगे तो 577 बच्चों का जिक्र किया है पूरे स्कीम में, ऑर्फन बच्चों का, जो 1 मई से 25 मई तक ऑर्फन हुए हैं। लेकिन अगर मैं अपने जिले की बात आपको बता दूं तो लगभग 34 बच्चे पाए हैं। उनमें से एक बच्चे के मतलब दोनों माँ और बाप चले गए, और बाकी जो बच्चे इनका ब्रेड विनर है, ज्यादातर फादर चला गया, 7 बच्चों की माँ चली गई। अब इशू ये है कि अगर हम देखें पूरे डिस्ट्रिक्ट में 3000 लोगों का डेटा है, 3000 लोग जो गए हैं, हर परिवार के कोई एक है, कोई 2 लोग हैं। अगर देखें तो 2500 परिवारों को हम लोग कॉलिंग कर रहे हैं कि आपके बच्चों की क्या स्थितियां है, कोई बच्चे ऑर्फन हुए, कितने बच्चे हैं, क्या कर रहे हैं। और हमारे ध्यान में आया कि हमारे पास तो मतलब जो इंफॉर्मेशन आई है चाइल्ड वेलफेयर कमिटी, डीसीपीयू, ये पूरे सिस्टम के साथ है, वुमेन एंड चाइल्ड वेलफेयर डिपार्टमेंट के साथ, वो तो 34 बच्चों की है। लेकिन हमने देखा है कि लगभग 150 से ज्यादा बच्चे हैं जिनकी माँ या बाप चले गए हैं। तो अभी सिचुएशन ये है कि इन तक पहुंचना, तुरंत पहुंचना बहुत जरूरी है, क्योंकि बहुत बार ये देखते हैं कि ये बच्चे अनअटेंडेड सिचुएशन में रहते हैं, स्कीम्स रहती हैं, लेकिन बच्चों तक कौन पहुंचेगा। तो मुझे लगता है कि इस वक्त चाइल्ड केयर इंस्टीट्यूशंस, बच्चों के लिए काम करने वाले वॉलंटियर, इनका एक रोल बनता है और उनको प्रोत्साहित,
ये बहुत जरूरी है। मैं दर्शकों के लिए बता दूं, व्हाट मिस्टर कुलकर्णी is telling us here is that tracing, first of all, getting all of those children traced who have lost parents itself is a task. I mean, we are talking about financial assistance today, that comes at a later stage. What Mr. Kulkarni is telling us here is that have we even achieved the basic of rounding up all those kids who are out there who may have lost a parent. Tuhin, what do you think on this? Is there such monitoring surveillance system in place to track and trace all the children? Because Mr. Kulkarni has raised a very important point.
Well, that's very important, and that is where the NGOs and the Swayamsevi Sansthas always have a very active role to play. There are several schemes of the government where which are very participatory in nature. Whether it is road safety, whether it is women or child welfare, the role of NGOs becomes very critical. So I am sure going ahead there will be more guidelines, participatory guidelines of how NGOs can make these schemes a lot better. Because at the end of the day, the government can do so much as to lay out a financial package. The government can set this policy in motion. But many of these things, because they involve the general citizens, a better execution would happen with a more optimal, participatory role of the NGOs, which I'm sure in the coming days or coming weeks, we will see the government framing some guidelines on that as well.
Okay, Dr. Dalwai, you're also a part of the pediatric task force in Maharashtra. How does it work? I mean, is there a system in place to track, trace all the children? I know that there is a lot of work going on to create pediatric wards in Maharashtra for the third wave. That part, a lot of focus is there. Is there enough focus in Maharashtra to trace these children as well? What we are talking about right now, I want you to talk also about what Tuhin said, that there's always this NGO partnership, public-private partnership, community partnerships that become equally important. It's not entirely the onus of the government. Do you agree?
I completely agree with Mr. Tuhin Sinha on that. It cannot be only the Prime Minister or the Chief Minister who's expected to do everything because this is a humanitarian crisis. Having said that, let me answer your question about what's being done in Maharashtra. And hence, more than, well, let me congratulate the Prime Minister for this great and magnanimous announcement. And after having congratulated it, let me get it out of the way that I have respected that. Now, let me tell you what I think may not be adequate with it. The problem is if we try to make the financial announcement as a be-all and the complete thing about it, there's a huge danger of ignoring exactly the points which Mr. Girish Kulkarni spoke about. And hence, we need to play down the Prime Minister's announcement, even
Yes.
politically, because it doesn't target about what's needed right now on the ground. Of course, it's a good scheme in terms of financial ability for the child, but that comes at the time when the child is able to utilize it. Today, I would say as a pediatrician, there's an issue about life and survival and security for the child first. And hence, what the announcement should have also done is, what again Mr. Tuhin said correctly, is that the NGOs, there should be some mechanism to look at what the NGOs are doing, monitor the NGOs on the ground, and make them stronger to be able to deliver and walk that extra last mile. What Maharashtra has done has gone ahead and established a task force for COVID. And let me say very happily, I am not a practicing intensive care pediatrician, but I am a child developmental and behavioral psychologist, and they've included me not for treating the illness of COVID, but for the psychosocial impact on the children being seen in the state. So the recognition of the fact that children will have emotional and psychological impact itself is very important. Now, already in the training that we are imparting to the doctors, to the Anganwadi Sevikas, to the government, this inclusion of the psychosocial impact, including bereavement. And just to tell you, we have finished 2 trainings for doctors, family physicians, and pediatricians online. The next training is scheduled for Anganwadi Sevikas and Asha workers. And even there, of course, taking care of the ill child as well as looking at bereavement and psychosocial impact is very important. My request is at the state as well as the central level, instead of politicizing the issue, this is too sensitive an issue to politicize. We must look at what needs to be done on the ground right away, step 1. And as a backup, step 2, of course, the financial announcement which has been made over a period of time, it can be used. But we cannot ignore the immediate situation on the ground right now.
Yes, so Tuhin, quick response to that, there's a tendency to think that once we announce a financial package, we've done our bit, it's done and dusted. What Dr. Dalwai is telling us that no, that is of course useful, but this is a very large area that needs a lot of focus, that needs tremendous focus. And I want you to comment on those state-run homes from where we are reporting horrors. Are children even safe in these destitute homes? We have heard so many stories, the complete nightmares of, child welfare department ministers, spouses involved, you know which story I'm talking about, in molestation. So are children safe even in these homes? This is part of the process to send them to one of these child care homes if nobody comes forward to adopt them, a family member comes forward or nobody adopts them. Tell us more about what the government is doing to make sure that these child care homes are safe, Tuhin Sinha.
Now, first of all, let me compliment Dr. Dalwai. He's taken a very positive approach, and I'm glad he appreciates certain points made by me. As a suggestion, let me put forth to Mr. Dalwai. See, apart from the COVID deaths, there are a lot of deaths which have taken place in different states, which are oxygen disasters, which are fire incidents. So I can think of at least 4 known cases in Maharashtra itself, and there are cases in other states also. There are cases in Goa, there are cases in Maharashtra, which includes the ones in Bhandup, Thane, Nasik, and Nalasopara, where 80 people have been killed. So I think, apart from what the center is doing...
You are diverting to the hospital fire issue, Tuhin. I will take up that issue on another debate. Let's talk about this particular one right now, on childcare homes, please. I don't have time. I need to wind up in 5 minutes. Quickly, please. Yes.
Here was a positive suggestion to the state government that apart from what the center is doing, if the states can chip in on these additional deaths and adopt the orphans who have been orphaned by these accidents, that would make the task of that would only complement the task of the central government. Now, coming to your issue of horror homes, I think that's a completely separate issue. You're mixing up 2 topics because you are presuming that many of the orphans would actually have to stay in the orphan homes. That is not the case. Many of them would be staying with their close relatives, and center.
No, it's part of the system. You have to make them safe. You cannot ignore this issue. It's
So I'm
part of the
glad-
entire system of keeping our orphan children safe. How can you say that is not part of the discussion?
I'm glad Mirror now is always so vigilant. So while the policy is being made or drafted, I'm glad you keep asking for the plan. We'll come out with a plan. Don't worry, we'll take care of everything. The first announcement has been made and that needs to be appreciated. That's a step in the right direction.
No, we have done that. Okay, one last word. गिरीश कुलकर्णी जी, आप रोज बच्चों के साथ जुड़े होते हैं और उनके मसले देख, अभी फिलहाल की सबसे बड़ी चुनौती क्या है इसमें जो हम देख रहे हैं? और आपने भी कहा कि काफ़ी बच्चों का ये एक बहुत ही वल्नरेबल सिचुएशन में आप लोगों के पास आते हैं, उनके साथ क्या प्रोसेस फॉलो किया जाता है?
उनके लिए एक इमोशनल सपोर्ट, और उनको लगता है कि मतलब जैसा माँ चली गई या बाप चला गया तो अब उनकी तरफ देखने वाला कोई नहीं है। और आप देखते हैं कि जैसे रूरल एरियाज में, स्लम्स में बच्चों का एक्सप्लॉयटेशन उनके अपने करीबी लोग ही करते हैं, दूसरे करीबी रिश्तेदारी करते हैं, तो बड़े इमोशनली मतलब अकेला लगता है, इनसिक्योर लगता है। और अभी उनके साथ मतलब उनको मदद करना एक और बात है, लेकिन उनको मानसिक दृष्टि से सपोर्ट देना, इमोशनली किसी और परिवार के साथ जोड़ना, मैंने जो कहा वो फैमिली बेस्ड केयर जैसे काम के ऊपर अभी ज्यादा ध्यान देना चाहिए। और मैं एक बात आपको कहूंगा कि मतलब ये मानसिक अकेलापन और डर, ये सब बच्चों के सबसे बड़े इश्यू है। और दूसरा मैं आपको कहूंगा कि अभी हम लोग पिछले 30 साल से चाइल्ड मदर्स के साथ, रेप विक्टिम के साथ काम करते हैं। मैं आपको बताना चाहूंगा कि सगे भाई से या सगे बाप से लड़कियां प्रेग्नेंट होती हैं, तो आप क्या ऐसा नहीं बोल सकते कि घर में लड़कियां सुरक्षित नहीं है। संस्थाओं ने बहुत बच्चों के जान बचाए हैं और बच्चों के लिए अच्छा काम किया। कुछ संस्थाएं गलत भी काम करती हैं, जैसे सिस्टम में हर जगह कोई ना कोई गलत लोग होते हैं, तो हम उनकी तरफ नहीं देखें। संस्थाओं की बहुत ज्यादा जरूरत है, संस्थाएं प्रोएक्टिवली बहुत कुछ काम बच्चों के लिए करती है, उनको इस नजरिए से देखना नहीं चाहिए, ऐसा मेरे को लगता है।
Afrida, just can I have just 30 seconds? Can I just have 30 seconds?
Go ahead, Dr. Dalwai.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'd just like to correct my dear friend Tuhin ji that in Maharashtra, to the best of my knowledge, there has not been a single death because of lack of oxygen. Yes, there might have been an accident at Vasai, at Mumbai, I agree to that, but there was no death because of lack of oxygen in Maharashtra at all, and that's like a big thing in the current situation in the country, where even Gangaram Hospital had oxygen-related deaths. The second point is again what Kulkarni Sahab has said so rightly, and I would like to request my dear friend Tuhin ji to take it ahead with the central government that the financial part is part 3. The part 1 of the announcement should be to look at the safety and security. Part 2, look at the psychosocial ability. And third will be the finance. And hence, I would request the Honorable Prime Minister to come out with the guidelines on how the NGOs and how the other government as well as non-governmental bodies can actually track each and every child and see that he's safely being helped tonight. That there is no threat. What Kulkarni said is so perfect. Kulkarni sir said is so perfect. The predators are often inside the house. And as this is happening because of COVID, that we are actually revamping our health infrastructure because of these challenges. The entire pediatric healthcare in Maharashtra is being revamped now looking at COVID. I hope and pray that all the central as well as state governments take this opportunity with people like Girish ji to look at revamping the safety and security of children across the country.
I can ensure you that the women and
I'm afraid we'll have to close the conversation.
In this, I can assure you that the Child and Women Welfare Ministry will be stepping in a big way on this. We are committed to securing the future of children in every which way, and we are going to walk the talk. You can rest assured on that.
Okay, I welcome that assurance. Tuhin Sinha, thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Sameer Dalwai and Mr. Girish Kulkarni, appreciate your joining us and sharing your views with us. My concerns are simply with regards to the checks and balances. Do we have that in place? Will there be a process of bypassing the laws? There are very stringent adoption laws and those must be maintained. Overall, of course, the importance on mental welfare must be as much as the physical safety. Children who are coping with loss of a parent, the processing of the trauma, that also deserves equal attention. I hope the government of the day looks into those issues as well. Thanks for watching the Sunday edition of The Urban Debate.